Oh, hello. My name is Mara, and welcome to Books Like Whoa. Okay, so I'm doing another Get Ready With Me today because I filmed one of these for my 2-year booktube anniversary, and A, I had fun doing that, and B, I realized that I think that this Get Ready With Me format could be a good way for me to do videos that are more personal, because it makes me feel less awkward to have something to do with my hands whilst talking to you guys about either myself or just things that are closer to my heart. It makes me feel a little less seen or in the spotlight. So I am going to continue to do that. And today today we are, I'm getting ready to go to lunch. So I figured kind of anytime I'm going to actually do my makeup, because just for context, I don't do this full beat all that often. I would say once a week, maybe. And I only do it if I'm either going to be filming and or I have going to be contextually appropriate to have this level of face makeup on. So I just figured anytime I have that happening and a more personal video idea, I could just do this. So we're gonna do this again. And I also, part of this is because I wanted to have some makeup playtime with this new thing. This is the Kaja Bento box, and it's 3 super shiny eyeshadows, and the little plasticky things always fall out when I do that. But I've seen a lot of influencers talking about this, and I saw it at Sephora, and I had some free points that I'd used to get this gift card thing, so I just got this for fun. So we're gonna play with this as well. Anyway, all that to say, the video idea that I had that is a little more personal is that I wanted to talk about books that have very specific memories to me. And what I mean by that is the same way that you, when you smell something, it takes you to a specific place or time, or I don't know, you hear a song on the radio and it makes you think of something. I definitely have books that I really strongly associate with those kinds of memories. And I definitely have books that are kind of like that. And the book that occasioned this, because I realized as I was reading it, oh, I'm always gonna associate this book with this time, was Sapphire Flames. And it's a specific dad-related book memory, and I want to just go ahead and get those out of the way first, because those are the ones that are most likely to make me cry and the most I guess vulnerable for me, so I kind of want to just do those first. So as I was reading, I read an arc of Sapphire Flames, and if you don't know, what you don't know is a lot, shout out to Peter, is that I absolutely adore Ilona Andrews. Ilona Andrews is my favorite writer currently writing, and it's a husband-wife team, and they write urban fantasy, romance, and or sci-fi romance, and or paranormal romance. And most of their series, I would actually say they are romances, but they don't necessarily read as a romance. Their Hidden Legacy series, the first arc, I think definitely read much more like a romance. I think some of that is because those books are published by Avon. So they're more kind of true blue versions of a paranormal romance, but even those I think could be friendly points of entry if you are open to having a strong romantic element in a urban fantasy type book. But anyway, so the Hidden Legacy series is rebooting. There's a second arc of it coming out. There was a bridging novella called Diamond Fire. Redoing it, they had a bridging novella introducing you to the new POV character who was the younger sister of our main character in the first trilogy. I really like her. Her name is Catalina. And the book memory that this really set in place for me is that I got an arc of it, which was just such an amazing thing. And I decided to read it during my birthday week because it was my first birthday week without my dad. And I don't know why, guys, but it really, really hit me. I was, it was so sweet. I had a lot of people really go out of their way to try to make that week special. And I don't know, I mean, I assume it probably had something to do with the fact that it was the first one without dad. But it was kind of funny because it was my birthday was on a Tuesday this year. My birthday is 2 days before Independence Day. So it's always my birthday has always kind of been a non-event because people are like out of town and it gets overshadowed by the holiday. I think that's true for anybody who has birthdays right around a major holiday. But people really went out of their way to make it special. I was turning 32, so it's like a random birthday on a random day. But yeah, people were super sweet and supportive, and that was really nice. But I was just really, really sad the week of my birthday and really missing my dad. And this book just made me so happy. And I will definitely, I think, like always therefore associate it with that, with this birthday. Whenever I think of this book, I will definitely think about it being a nice bright spot in what was kind of a hard week. And similarly, this year when I had my first Father's Day without Dad, Well Met by Jen Deluca, I've talked about that on here before. It was just like such a, it's a slow burn romance, which I really enjoy those in terms of like immersive books that really just like, you know, kind of sweep me up and take my mind off of things. I feel like it was just like a perfect example of that type of book. And I really like, again, that was a really sad day, and it totally just like immersed me and really took my mind off of the day. And then 2 other dad related ones, and then we'll move on to things that are not as sad. The first one is, so when I lived in Vancouver for 3 years for grad school, which I loved. Shout out to my Great White North peeps. I absolutely love Canada, Canadians. I loved living in Vancouver. I often wonder why I returned because I could have stayed for at least 3 years, which was the duration of my my student visa. I could have gotten a temporary residence for 3 years. I don't know why I didn't do that, but so I was in Vancouver, and I had to obviously get back to America, and so my dad road tripped out with a friend of his in my parents' big ass SUV. And the friend in Seattle flew back to Tennessee. My dad came up, we packed up all my shit, and we road tripped together back to Tennessee, which is like a super fond memory that I'm so glad that we have. Like that was like very special time that I think very fondly of. And with the audiobook that we listened to was Devil in the White City, and I picked that one because I was like, oh, it's got like kind of like a murder mystery type component to it. I just love these shadows, guys. They're so soft and like pretty. Anyway, it had, and he was definitely like a crime procedural TV kind of guy. Like whoever CBS is trying to market to, it was basically my dad. Like he watched everything that they did. So I had that kind of like serial killer piece of it. And then it also, my dad owned his own construction company. So it also had like a building architecture piece to it with the World's Fair and with the crazy murder house. So I always think, whenever I think of that book, The Devil in the White City by Erik Larson, I think of Dad. And we both agreed it didn't really work as an audiobook, but the information in it was really good, and we had a lot of fun talking about it. So I think of that. And then last but not least, I grabbed a couple of these books for my thumbnail. I don't have most of them here with me, but Magic Triumphs, again, just in terms of like, this was the final book in the Kate Daniel series. This came out the week my father died, and it was a very up and down week, and he had a real up after being very down, and so we actually thought he was going to be fine. And so I came back to Nashville, and when I got back, this was waiting for me because I'd pre-ordered it, and I was so stressed out that week. It was also my first week at a new job. Like literally, I spent the night at my parents' house, because initially we thought that if he made it through this one night, then he was going to be fine, and he did. So I woke up at 4:30 and drove from Knoxville to Nashville to go to my first day at work. So I was exhausted and stressed. And that Tuesday, when again, I think we kind of felt like he was going to make it, I was still in Nashville, and this arrived, and I was just like, thank you. And so this was just like such the perfect, like, my favorite author, my favorite series, the last one. And like, I'm just so thankful. This is a book I'm very thankful for, because it was just like a respite in what was an utter shit week. This was like a few hours of just like being able to forget and chill. So whenever I think of this book, I think of the week my dad died, but in like a very positive, like in the sense of like, I'm very thankful for this book. So those are all of the like really sad ones. And I feel like this is a real downer note to start this video on, but those were the books that really got me thinking about this, of just like, I remember like the specific time and place reading this and it meant something to me. So then going back to maybe like, oh, just that is real pretty. Okay. Noted. We're gonna start with the mid-tone one and go from there. Okay, so sorry, going all the way back to high school. So another very specific memory I have is for Jane Eyre, which is, if you guys watch this channel, you may know is my all-time favorite book. And I remember that this is the book I read the weekend that we went. This is sparkly and it's making me so happy. Okay. Makeup makes me really happy, guys. It's just like coloring for adults. It's coloring on your face and it's just fun. Okay, so sorry. These are so beautiful. Oh, I'm so happy with this. Okay. So Jane Eyre. Sorry, I'm like a 4-year-old. Distracted by the glitter. Okay, so Jane Eyre was the book I read the weekend that we went on, me and my parents went to visit Virginia Tech, because that was one of the schools that I got into. And so we were driving up from Knoxville to Blacksburg, which is a beautiful drive if you ever get the chance. The kind of corridor between Knoxville and Washington, D.C. is like one of the most beautiful drives ever. I used to do it all the time when I lived in D.C. and would go home and visit my parents. But it's beautiful, just like rolling green hills and mountains. Oh, actually that darker one is not nearly as exciting. Okay, this middle one was worth the price of admission. I am way into it, if you couldn't tell from my delighted reaction. So yeah, anyway, I remember not really giving a shit about Virginia Tech, mostly because I was so engrossed in Jane Eyre. And I decided to read it because it was one of the kind of classics that I hadn't hit as a kid. And I'd read Wuthering Heights already earlier, because again, I just didn't really get to the Brontes when I was a wee lass. So I was like, oh, I need to read some Bronte. So I read and really liked Wuthering Heights. I'd be curious to find out if I actually liked it now. I know a lot of people who read it as adults don't always love it as much. I don't know. I think it may just depend dispositionally kind of how you feel about a little bit of drama, a little bit of over angst. And if you're trying, people who read Wuthering Heights as an actual romance, like, ooh, God help you. Anyway, so I'd read that and I was like, oh, I should read Jane Eyre. And it was my favorite. It's my favorite book ever. And I just was engrossed with it. I loved it. Couldn't put it down. Rochester is not someone that in real life I would be all that into dating or being with. But like in fiction, I mean, I'll just tell you, I'm into it. I just love him. He's so broody. He's so mysterious. And every time I reread this book, I try to have a more, and I do, I mean, as an adult, I have a lot more critical lens on him. I use Jane Eyre as one of the primary texts in my thesis. But guys, he changes. I know a lot of people hate the ending of Jane Eyre and feel like, well, I don't want to get into spoilers, I guess, but a lot of people feel like it's a cop-out ending, and I disagree. I do not think it is a cop-out ending. I think, like, especially after I studied it, like, kind of like close reading, I really think it's not a cop-out. So anyway, I was totally engrossed in that. So I will always remember that trip because of that reading experience of like not making good decisions about my future potentially, because I was just focused on reading Jane Eyre. This is Shape Tape. Also, I at some point didn't even get a full pimple, just like an under the surface blemish. And it has, because I'm so pale, any like zits I have or like any kind of skin imperfections linger for literal months. So it looks like I have a nose ring scar from something that didn't ever actually even surface. It's very frustrating. Anyway, so that was one memory, specific one I had from high school. Another one was Great Expectations, because when I was in the 9th grade, aka grade 9, aka freshman, aka whatever schooling equivalent you have that is like the first year of high school, or like when you're about 14, it's called something different, I feel like, in a lot of different countries. But when I was at that age, we had an amazing English teacher, like English literature teacher, and he really did a great job of getting like everyone very into classics and very into like these, you know, kind of more, you know, things that traditionally apparently teens don't like to read. And the kind of, so like we had a really great time reading Romeo and Juliet, like we would stage it, and even people who weren't normally that into English class or really liked this class, he was that kind of teacher. And the one that like captured our entire grade's imagination and we were all so into was Great Expectations. Now granted, we were also kind of geeky, a lot of us, but anyway, we all loved it. And we had, one of the things he would have us do is we would have to get into teams and like video, like stage scenes basically, so like make our own movie versions of it. And I just remember my group had, well, first of all, just like Miss Havisham is like fodder. If you're like having to actually stage that and like act it out, you realize like how fucking crazy that is. So that was fun. But then our group had a scene with Herbert, who is the pale young gentleman. And my friend Lauren, our group is all girls, and my friend Lauren played the pale young gentleman, Herbert. And it was just like, that image of her in that role is iconic to me and I will forever remember it. Anyway, Great Expectations, I definitely have very specific memories around that one. And then I'm trying to think, going into college, some of my specific book memories. Well, I definitely have specific memories around the first Agatha Christie's I read, because I was coming back from studying abroad in Cambridge, which was like an amazing summer. I had such a great time and I was so sad to leave. If it was at all practical, I would 100% live in England. I absolutely like love it. I would live in like a small little town and like telecommute, but it's not practical. So coming back from Cambridge, and I had never really read Agatha Christie before, but I was like, I'm gonna pick something quintessentially British to read on the plane because I'm so sad to be leaving. And the two that I found in a Heathrow airport bookshop that sounded the best to me were Halloween Party and The Hollow. And I read either one or both. I think I may have read both of those on that plane ride, but in quick succession. But whenever I think of like how I got into Agatha Christie, that is definitely what comes to mind, because yeah, that was just like a very specific reason I read it. And Agatha Christie, as you guys know, is my all-time favorite author. So I always think of her very fondly, and when I think of my origin story with her, that is definitely what comes to mind. Okay, so we talked about high school, we talked about, I think, most of my ones in college, and then I'm trying to think like more as an adult, some of these book memories. Like one that comes to mind for me is when I read The Woman in White, because that was the first Christmas where like kind of my first like grown-up Christmas where I wasn't just like gonna go home for 2 weeks or whatever. Like I had like a specific window where I could be at my parents' house versus, you know, I had like some plans with friends, but also just like work and whatnot. So that definitely stands out. I remember filling some of like my downtime with The Woman in White and absolutely loving it and being just so charmed by it, and feeling like that definitely took my mind off things. And then I think another, like two other memories that come to mind for me are sort of like, or three really, are binge book, like series binge related. Three series binging things come to mind. So first, when I was in grad school, I remember getting really sick. I had like this weird stomach bug. Like I couldn't, like, I was just not hungry ever. And my stomach was like roiling is the word I want to use. It was really uncomfortable. But in between that, I was reading the Sookie Stackhouse series. I binge read all of that series through, I think, the 9th or the 10th one, wherever like things really went off the rails with her and Erik. I stopped reading that, and then I read the last half of the final book. And so I really enjoyed that series because I got the intel beforehand on where to start and stop. So I remember that, and that really got me into this idea. Like, I think that was a good, so that definitely was paranormal romance. I guess I need to include that in sort of my romance origin story, because I think that definitely primed the pump when later that same year, I think I went home to visit my parents for like 3 or 4 weeks that summer in between classes. And during that time, I found the Susan Mallory Fool's Gold series, and I binge read that entire thing while I was visiting my parents. And that really opened me up to the idea that I could like just generally could like romance. So yeah, I definitely remember like being up in the couch that's in my room at my parents' house, just like binging away while they were at work. If I didn't have plans that day, I would just sit and read that series, and I really loved it. And then I guess I just remember all of the romances I read in that first year, and I had this like one spot in my my grad school's library that I used to really like to sit in, and I remember just reading a bunch of the kind of like first romances I read. So like I remember reading The Duchess War and some Eloisa James and category romances, and just like all of these kind of my early encounters with that genre. I remember reading that there. Another memory from grad school before I get to my final one, because I'm just about done here, is I remember, so we got assigned to read Gilead for one of my classes, and I had procrastinated it, surprising no one. That's very on brand for me. And I procrastinated reading it, and then I had my spot. I liked to read it in the library at grad school, and then I also read. I had this chair at the top floor of grad school that was outside some of the classrooms. There's like these 2 big cushy chairs that I would like to, kind of camp out in, especially if I was going to read an entire book. So I grabbed Gilead and started reading it, and that is one of my all-time favorite books. Oh, this reminds me of another time I cried during grad school reading a book. So I started weeping because it's just so beautiful. It's like a really beautiful, beautiful book. And I just remember weeping, and the class that was in the room, like right outside of where I was crying, got out, and they were all like, "Girl, are you okay?" Because it was mostly people I knew. I was like, "I'm fine. It's okay." So I remember crying reading that book in that specific location. And then I also remember weeping in my room, because the first year at grad school, I lived in student housing, and I had like this sad little like student housing bed, and I was in that bed just weeping at the end of The Sparrow, because we had to pick like a couple of books like from a list, and I'd always meant to read The Sparrow because I'd always heard how amazing it was, and oh my gosh, it destroyed me. I was like laying on that bed just like ugly sobbing at the end of that book. It just killed me. So that's another memory of crying. Basically, this is just a history of what books I cried at and where I was when I cried. That's actually, we'd be here a very long time if we were talking about that, because I cry all the time during books. So we're on the last step here, so I'll go ahead and wrap this up. The other binge reading series memory that I have is I binge read, so after grad school when I was unemployed, and enjoying it. Well, alternatively enjoying it and freaking out. I was living with my parents. I lived with them for I think 3 or 4 months after grad school while I was looking for a job. But anyway, when I wasn't interviewing or submitting resumes or whatever, I was binge reading the Psy Changeling series from Nalini Singh. So I gobbled all 14 of those books up in short order. Let me tell you, it was amazing. So I remember that as a very specific binge reading memory. And yeah, I think that probably will do it, because we're done with this makeup look. We'll call this Pretty in Pink. I'm actually pretty happy with how this came out. Yeah. It's kind of soft, pretty. So yeah, anyway, so I just that it occurred to me, this idea of books that strongly evoke a specific memory. And so those are some of mine. And I would definitely love to hear from you guys what some of your book memories are. Do you have a book that sends you to a specific time and place in your life, or do you have a specific memory of reading it on a train? I mean, I remember reading The Moviegoer by Percy Walker on the train from Vancouver to Portland one year. That's, I don't know, I just feel like there's certain books that when they come up, I just can picture exactly where I was, what I was doing, what I was feeling. So definitely let me know if you guys have any of those as well. But yeah, I think that that will do it. So if you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, follow me on the social medias if you are so inclined. I have all that information listed in the description box below. And I think that that will do it. I hope you're having a super lovely day, and I will just talk to you soon.